The bell above the door chimed softly as Emily stepped into the small-town diner that Thursday morning. It was the kind of place where the booths were worn from years of stories, where the coffee never stopped brewing, and where the regulars nodded to each other without needing to speak. Outside, the sky was a dull gray, the kind of gray that seemed to quiet the world. Inside, however, things were about to get loud in all the wrong ways. Emily was 17. Her walk was careful, deliberate. She moved on crutches, her left leg missing since she was 11, taken from her in a hit-and-run accident that no one ever solved. Each step carried the memory of that day, though she never spoke of it. She never spoke much at all. With her dark hoodie pulled over her shoulders and her hair tied in a low ponytail, she simply looked like any other quiet teenager trying to disappear into the background. But that morning, invisibility failed her. She made her way to the farthest booth by the window, the one she always chose when she visited the diner alone. It was her little act of rebellion, slipping away from her laptop and textbooks to sip a chocolate milkshake in a place where nobody would expect to find her. Her mother, a nurse working 2 shifts at the county hospital, often did not know she had left the house. Emily saw it as a way to feel normal for a moment, to pretend she was just another kid skipping school for fun. The milkshake sat untouched in front of her, condensation forming on the glass. She traced her finger along the edge, deep in thought, until a sharp burst of laughter sliced through the room. It was not the kind of laughter that brought joy. It was jagged, cruel. 2 boys from the nearby high school had walked in. Their backpacks were slung low, their sneakers scuffed, their voices too loud for such a quiet place. At first, they whispered to each other, glancing toward Emily's table. Then the whispering turned into chuckles, then mocking. One of them, tall and arrogant, walked straight to her booth. He said something about her missing leg.
Something that did not need repeating. Emily looked down. The milkshake was the only thing between her and the world, and he knocked it off the table with one swift motion. The glass hit the floor and shattered. Chocolate spilled across the tiles like a stain that could never be cleaned. Everyone in the diner froze. The second boy laughed harder and, without warning, slapped her across the cheek. The sound echoed louder than the glass had. Emily flinched. Her eyes welled up, not just from pain, but from something deeper, something familiar. A silence heavier than shame settled over the diner. No one moved. The boys left, laughing as if they had won something. Emily stayed where she was, her hands trembling in her lap. Her cheek burned. Her chest felt hollow. The milkshake had been her small moment of joy. Now it was gone, just like the quiet she had been hoping for. Karen, the waitress, eventually walked over. She knelt down and said softly, "Sweetheart, don't cry." But Emily was not just crying about what happened in that moment. She was crying about all the moments, about the father who walked out after her accident, about the friends who slowly stopped calling, about the teachers who looked at her with pity instead of belief. The world had been unkind for too long. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 1 in 3 high school students in the United States reports being bullied at school. For teens with disabilities, that number is even higher. The stares, the whispers, the isolation, it builds up like weight on your shoulders. For Emily, that morning felt like the final ounce. She tried to get up, but her crutch slipped on the sticky floor. Karen rushed to help. Emily looked away, ashamed, as if needing help was yet another reason to feel broken. But Karen steadied her and said gently, "You are not alone, honey." Emily nodded, though she did not believe it. And yet, in that small-town diner, something was about to shift. Something that would remind her and everyone else that kindness has a strength of its own.
About an hour had passed since the boys left, and the diner had returned to its usual rhythm. Plates clinking, coffee pouring, and quiet conversations trying to fill the heavy silence they left behind. Emily sat in the same booth by the window, her head turned toward the gray clouds outside. Her cheek was still red, but the deeper hurt came from inside, the kind that does not fade with time. She kept glancing down, afraid that every eye in the diner might still be on her, though most people now looked away out of guilt, not indifference. Then came a sound unlike anything that had been heard in that place all morning. The low growl of motorcycle engines rolling to a stop outside. It was not aggressive, just loud enough to make people glance up. A moment later, the door opened, and 5 men stepped inside. They looked like they had stepped out of a different world. Leather jackets, rain-specked boots, thick beards, and worn denim. One had a silver chain dangling from his belt. Another had tattoos that crept down his forearms. And yet, something about him was different, calm, deliberate, grounded. At the front of the group was Mike, 61 years old, with silver streaks in his beard and eyes that had seen more than most. He scanned the room slowly, not looking for trouble, but reading the energy like someone who knew when something was off. Behind him were Tommy, the youngest at 34, and 3 other riders who made up their club, the Liberty Riders. They had been on their way through town to attend a charity ride for a children's hospital. Coffee and a slice of pie had been the only thing on their mind. That changed the moment Mike saw Emily sitting alone. Karen greeted them with a nervous smile, as if unsure what to expect. "Coffee for everyone?" she asked. Mike nodded. "And something sweet," he said. "Been a long ride." As the men settled into a booth, Mike leaned toward Karen and spoke in a low voice. "That girl in the corner, she all right?" Karen paused, unsure how much to say. "Some boys came in earlier, said awful things. One of them hit her. She did nothing wrong." Mike's jaw tightened. He glanced at Emily again. Her milkshake was gone. Her eyes were distant. Her crutch leaned awkwardly against the booth like a forgotten limb. Without saying a word, Mike stood up. The rest of the crew followed, as if they had rehearsed this 100 times before. They walked over to Emily's table. The clinking of forks stopped. Conversations faded into silence once again. Emily looked up, startled, unsure of what was happening. Mike crouched down slowly so he was eye level with her. "Hey there," he said, his voice gentle, calm. "Would it be all right if we sat with you?" Emily hesitated. Her eyes shifted between them, unsure. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. The men pulled up chairs and sat around her, not to crowd her, but to form a quiet circle of presence. It felt less like a wall of protection and more like a quiet message. You matter, and you are not alone. Mike noticed the red mark on her cheek, but said nothing about it. Instead, he let his voice carry something steadier than anger. "You didn't deserve what happened," he said, "not one bit." Then something shifted. Tommy got up and walked over to the counter. "Karen," he said, "can we get her another milkshake, the biggest one you've got?" He turned back to Emily with a soft smile. "Chocolate, right?" She blinked, surprised, and then, for the first time that day, the corners of her mouth lifted just a little. "Yeah," she whispered. As she sipped from the tall glass Karen placed in front of her, the men began to share, not out of pity, but connection. Mike told her about the crash that nearly took his legs 20 years ago, how he could not walk for months, how it changed everything. "Pain does not make you weak," he said. "It makes you real, and it teaches you how to stand back up, even if it looks different than before." Emily listened, eyes wide, her hand wrapped around the cool glass. She had heard words before, but these men were not preaching, they were remembering, and in their memories she saw her own strength reflected back at her. She was not a girl with a missing leg anymore. In that moment, she was just a person, worthy of being seen, worthy of being heard.
The afternoon sun had begun to break through the clouds by the time the door to the diner opened again. The bell jingled softly, and in walked the two boys, Chad and Kyle, laughing and nudging each other like nothing had happened. They were not paying attention to the room. They did not notice the shift in mood. They had no idea who was sitting with Emily now. Their steps slowed when they looked up and saw 5 large men surrounding the girl they had mocked just an hour before. The boys froze, their laughter dying instantly. For the first time that day, they looked small. Mike did not say a word at first. He simply turned his head and met their eyes, calm but unblinking. The room went still again. Coffee cups paused mid-air. Karen stopped wiping the counter. Mike stood up slowly, letting his presence speak before his voice ever did. He did not raise it. He did not threaten. He just let the weight of the moment settle around him. "You the ones who put your hands on her?" he asked, his voice low and even. Chad opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Kyle stammered, We didn't mean nothing, just messing around." Mike took a step forward, not aggressive, but firm. "Messing around is knocking over a napkin," he said. "What you did was cruelty." He pointed to Emily, who sat quietly in her booth, her new milkshake half finished, her hand still lightly shaking. "That girl," he continued, "is stronger than both of you put together, and she deserves more respect than either of you showed." The boys looked down at their shoes. They knew this was different. This was not detention or a scolding from a teacher. This was something that reached deeper, something that made them feel seen in a way they did not like. For a moment, it seemed like neither of them would speak. Then Mike said, "You owe her an apology, a real one. Look her in the eye. Say it like you mean it." Chad glanced at Kyle. Kyle looked at Emily. She did not say anything, but she did not look away. Her eyes were tired but steady. The boys stepped forward, awkward and ashamed. "We're sorry," Chad said first, his voice cracking. Kyle added, "We didn't know. We're sorry, Emily." It was the first time they had said her name. Mike nodded once. "Now get out of here. And next time you see someone carrying more weight than you could ever understand, you treat them with the respect they've earned." The boys turned and left without another word. The bell jingled behind them, and the sound of the door closing felt like the end of something heavy. Emily looked up at Mike. Her eyes shimmered, not from fear this time, but something closer to gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Mike gave a soft smile, one that carried decades of pain and hope all at once. "You don't have to thank us, kid," he said. "Just promise me this. Don't let people like that decide what you're worth. They don't get to write your story." In the quiet that followed, the diner felt lighter. Karen stepped out from behind the counter and brought over a fresh slice of pie. "On the house," she said gently, "for the bravest person in the room." Emily blushed. She did not feel brave, not yet, but something inside her had shifted. And though no one clapped, no one cheered, everyone in that room knew they had witnessed something rare. Not just justice, not just a stand against cruelty, but the quiet strength of kindness spoken with calm voices and steady eyes. The days that followed felt different, not just for Emily, but for everyone who had been there that morning. Word spread quickly through town about the girl who had been hurt, the bikers who stood with her, and the silence that finally found its voice. At the local high school, students started talking openly about bullying, and teachers began listening differently. A small group of seniors even started a kindness campaign, posting handwritten notes of encouragement on lockers and lunch tables. The ripple had begun. The two boys, Chad and Kyle, changed too. It was not dramatic, No one expected them to become saints overnight, but something had shifted in them. They started showing up after school at the local rehab center, offering help where they could. It was quiet work, humble work, the kind that doesn't show up in headlines, but matters just the same. One of the therapists mentioned they never missed a shift, even when no one was watching.
As for Emily, she returned to the diner the very next week. Karen greeted her with the same gentle smile and a fresh milkshake already waiting at the table. It had become their unspoken ritual. Emily would sit by the window, sketchbook in hand, and draw whatever came to mind. Sometimes it was faces, sometimes just hands, but most often it was motorcycles. She had started sketching portraits of the Liberty Riders from memory, Mike's calm eyes, Tommy's bright grin, the patches on their jackets that looked worn but proud. She gave the drawings to Karen, who promised to send them along. Emily never expected anything in return. It was simply her way of saying thank you, the only way she knew how. And then, one crisp Saturday morning, the rumble returned. Engines rolled down Main Street, slower this time, as if they knew they were being watched. Emily looked up from her seat just as the door swung open. Mike walked in first, carrying something wrapped in a deep blue cloth. The rest of the riders followed, each one smiling, not with excitement, but with quiet pride. Karen stepped aside, hands over her mouth. Emily stood up slowly, unsure what was happening. Mike approached her table and gently unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a prosthetic leg, custom-made, sleek, painted in soft metallic silver with a line of gold across the side. And engraved near the top, in careful lettering, were 3 simple words: "You are strong." Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She reached out to touch it, then paused. Mike nodded. "It's yours," he said. "A friend of ours runs a foundation. When they heard about you, they wanted to help." The diner was silent, but not heavy like before. This time, it was the silence of something sacred. Emily cried openly as she hugged Mike, then each of the riders. No one said much, but they did not need to. Later that afternoon, after the bikers had left, Emily sat on the diner steps, the new leg resting beside her, still wrapped in its cloth. Karen sat down next to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "See," she said, "not all angels have wings." Emily smiled through her tears. "Some wear leather," she whispered. The next few weeks brought even more changes. Emily started walking with the new leg, learning step by step, fall by fall. Mike had been right. Every step was a victory, and each one reminded her that she was not broken, just becoming. According to the Amputee Coalition, nearly 2 million Americans live with limb loss, and every year, more than 185,000 new amputations occur. But what those numbers do not show is the resilience behind each case, the way people learn to move again, to hope again, and to find joy in places they never expected. Emily never forgot that day. She never forgot the laughter that hurt, or the silence that followed. But more importantly, she never forgot who stepped in when no one else did. She began to speak up more, in school board meetings, in community forums, even at local events raising awareness for youth with disabilities. People listened, because when someone who has been quiet for so long finally finds their voice, it carries weight. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the town quieted for the night, Emily stood outside the diner. The neon sign buzzed softly above her, casting a warm glow on the pavement. She took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel less. She felt whole. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had been restored. Dignity, belief, connection. And all because a few men on motorcycles chose to care.
If this story moved something in you, take a moment to reflect, to remember the last time someone showed up when you needed it, or better yet, the last time you showed up for someone else. Because the truth is, kindness is louder than cruelty, and courage, more often than not, rides in quietly and speaks with compassion. Before you go, tell us in the comments, what is one act of kindness you will never forget? Your story might be the hope someone else needs today. And as Emily's story reminds us, sometimes the kindest angels ride Harleys.